Hey everyone, this is James from TDB here, bringing another Inbetweenisode. This is the first drinking Inbetweenisode, I think, in quite some while, although I do always schedule stuff in advance, so I tend to mix it up a little bit when I film stuff and when I release it. But the Big Blue Pot is back, and we are going to be drinking some ripe, but also wanted to talk a bit about kind of thematically related things to this tea. What makes a tea stand out, to me at least, and what sets it apart from other types of tea. So we're drinking ripe, and ripe is one of those categories of tea that is, a somewhat monotonous sort of category. There's not necessarily a ton of variation within it, not certainly as much as raw Puer or something like that, which is the most obvious comparison where you can have all this kind of different aging and things like that. Of course, you can have those different aging at ripe, but the whole point of ripe is you're kind of getting a finished product, so something that you can drink a year or two after it's been pressed and after it's been aired out a little bit. So it's really a product that's not necessarily created for aging. In fact, I'd say probably the vast majority of it is not aged. Nevertheless, it's something still that you can have some interesting teas. I think one tea that Denny and I brought on recently is the Reading Room from White to Tea, which is really fancy, really high source material. That source material would undoubtedly be used for raw 99 times out of 100. So what makes that tea stand out is the source material, but also the piling process. In this case, this tea is a little more conventional. This is the Yunnan Sourcing Bawang from 2023, and it's a tea that I brought on 3 times in the last 4 years. This is the 4th time bringing on this tea. So that's quite a bit of times. We brought on the 2019, I think the 2021 twice, and then this will be the 4th time, so 2023. And I like it quite a bit. In fact, I like this one too. This is not to be confused with the Chen Cheng Hao blend Bawang. Same name, different teas. And my friend Meng actually reminded me of this tea when a Yunnan sourcing sale was happening, so I went ahead and bought a cake, knowing that, it's ripe, it's easy to drink. I get through ripe pretty fast in my household, so it's a pretty easy thing to get through, and sure enough, I am just about almost all the way through this cake. And in my opinion, if I were to sort of rank the orders of Bawang, keeping in mind that I'm ranking against my memory as opposed to a side-by-side or any sort of more detailed comparison, I think this is probably my second favorite behind the 2019. I did like the 2021 quite a bit. In fact, that was the winner of Shumageddon. But this tea, in fact, I think has a lot of the characteristics that I really, really like from the 2019, perhaps even more so than the 2021. So what makes it stand out in a somewhat monotonous category? Well, I think a lot of it is how it is blended in this, like a lot of ripe. In fact, my preferred ripes is a blend. It's a blend of different materials. Scott keeps it fairly vague in his description of it. He describes it Munghai, Simao, and Linsong. So those are all three, kind of the 3 major, I think they're all counties or something like that, areas where Puer is grown. So that doesn't necessarily narrow it down a whole lot, which is totally fine. But that's interesting just in the sense that this tea comes from all over Yunnan. This is far from a single source tea. And so I think it's, I think it speaks towards the blending and things like that he's able to create this. And that's not an easy feat. I mean, there's one thing for a big, big factory like Munghai Tea Factory. Another thing for, Yunnan Sourcing is a fairly large operation in the scale of Western Puer-facing vendors, but it's a really small company, certainly. Tiny compared to the big Chinese companies that are making tea. So that's nice that he's able to make something fairly consistently. And what really stands out to me on this blend is the overall robustness and that kind of having that backbone there. And that's something that I always go for. I think if you've watched enough of these Big Blue Pot episodes, you'll notice that I tend to gravitate towards those that have a really robust backbone that can, stand up to a bit of push as far as brewing goes and have kind of like a full body brew. And I just really like that kind of that sort of just characteristic as far as like a daily drink goes. But the thing that makes this a little atypical is it has the bitterness blended in just to my preference. And the bitterness is something that I don't like it if it's overdone. And there are certain teas that we have brought on in the past where I just think it's a little too much for how I like to drink, right? And the context. And so if like I'm going to serve it to my wife or something like that, I don't want her to say like, oh, this is really, really bitter. because she's drinking these ripes every day too. And so that has definitely happened on some of the ripes, but never this one. That's not to say the bitterness isn't there. It definitely is, but it's integrated in just a perfect way. And I think you'll find that even from the first episode I was talking about this tea, that I was always referring to that characteristic. So, cheers. Not particularly sweet, but nice big body, robust, nice little bitterness coming down through the middle. Yeah, and it's really nice. I think if I were to blind guess the area of this tea, I would blind guess it's Monghai County somewhere. Obviously, that's not totally correct because it's blended from a bunch of different areas. But for me, at least, those characteristics shine. And I think maybe those other areas are kind of adding a little bit of layers. Usually that bitterness I would associate with kind of greater Bawang, or if you're to narrow it down, sort of Banjong sort of leaves. So that would be my guess for what's bringing that bitterness. And my guess is it's one of the 5 or 6 different areas that Scott is using that is really giving it that little oomph there. And I really like it. I think it really integrates very, very well into the tea. So good thumbs up to Scott over there. I bought this tea for $40.50 from the US site. I think it's gone up a few bucks since then, but not that much. And Yunnan Sourcing was one of those vendors that's always running sales and things like that. So I think it's definitely worth a pickup in terms of that. If you've never tried this tea, I think this one is definitely worthy of the name Bawang. So definitely one that I'm going to keep watching out for when Scott releases them. And let's just brew another one. And so for those not familiar, I brew between 8.5 to 10 grams in this big brew pot very casually. In the morning, I'll even drink it in a mug these days. But it's just a kind of a fairly casual brew for me. And that just tends to be how ripe I tend to drink ripe these days. Most of the time, except with the exception being on TDB with Denny. But when I'm doing these in-between-sodes, I like to just show how I have it more normally. These days, I've been gravitating a little bit more towards that 10 grams just to give it that really, really robust brew. Let it hang out for a little bit. And this is a tea that rarely is weak, and so I consider that a thumbs up. There's certain teas that you need to push them a little bit to really get them going, and I had been drinking some other ripe more recently, and those are teas that you need to push it a little bit more to get it to kind of my desired potency. This one doesn't require as much. So look at that nice, beautiful dark color right there already. That wasn't even a particularly long steep right there. So good longevity on this tea as well. So yeah, definitely enjoying it. Some chocolate, definitely not particularly sweet. That's not a prerequisite for me enjoying ripe necessarily. So yeah, really, really solid. I have totally forgot what I rated this tea, but I would give it the same rating as I gave the 2019, I think. Maybe 0.1 less. So whatever that was, I would give it that. Okay, so thank you everyone for tuning in. Let me know if you've tried this tea, what your opinions are of it, how you rank the different 2019, 2021, and 23. And hopefully Scott keeps this line going because I give it 2 thumbs up. Thank you all for tuning in. I'll see you all next time. Cheers.